everybody on the list. We'll wait a little bit longer, but I think we're just about reaching our cap. Right, the number of participants hasn't moved in a little bit, and so I think we can go ahead and get started.
Yeah, we just have one person in the waiting room who's listed as Galaxy S9 Plus, so I'm trying to figure out who they are.
Okay, all right, and have you started the recording?
Yep, recording is live, so we're good to start.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us this morning to discuss the bill that Senator Lundeen and I will be carrying this session to address measures to protect the public health related to regulated marijuana. As many of you know and have witnessed from previous bills that I have worked on, my reasons for taking on this issue, like I take on any issue, go back to the patients that I see in clinic every day as a pediatrician. In the last year alone, I have been involved in the care of a young man who has dealt with increasingly serious mental health issues as his high potency THC use has increased. And after many failed attempts to treat his depression as primary care docs, we ended up having to facilitate him going into intensive inpatient treatment. And he really continues to suffer from issues that he'll have for the rest of his life that are exacerbated by these substances. In the last month, actually, I've cared for a teenage girl who lost over 25 pounds due to frequent THC use that led to hyperemesis cannabinoid syndrome. And she required hospitalization because of really severe abdominal pain, because of electrolyte abnormalities, and then required a lot of care in our clinic afterwards. So these cases are occurring all over the state. And as a healthcare provider, I just don't think that we can ignore this issue anymore. Now, a lot of things have been said in public, including the inaccurate statement that I'm trying to decimate the industry in Colorado. That is not my goal. This is the start of a conversation about public health issues that I'm seeing as a doctor, and that are being reported out not only by CDPHE, but by other physicians, parents, and advocates who have reached out to me and contributed to my knowledge base on this issue. And as is customary for all draft bills, which has become an issue of argument around this one, this is a starting point for discussion. And I look forward to hearing feedback from you today. This is why we are having the stakeholder meeting on how to improve upon the draft so that we can balance what is an important industry in Colorado with the public health that I am trying to protect as a doctor. So with that, I will turn it over to my colleague, Senator Lundeen, so that he can introduce himself and share his interest in this issue.
Thank you very much, Representative Caraveo, and thank you for the service you do to your patients and to the state by virtue of your role in the House of Representatives. It is good to be carrying this bill with such a thoughtful partner. I want to thank everybody else who's on the call for being here today. I recognize many faces that come from many perspectives, and this is truly what I perceive to be an important element of the process, and that is stakeholding, a discussion between competing interests to seek out policy that is most beneficial for the state of Colorado. We are, that is, Rep. Caraveo and I are certainly stated in our interest to avoid conversations or to avoid the perception that we are seeking a prohibition or criminalization of marijuana. That's not the interest. I'm interested in the state, however, regulating the industry appropriately with nuance in a way that allows for the ongoing growth of this important industry in the state, and at the same time, ensuring public health and safety as a top priority. I think that must be the starting point of this conversation: public health and safety, number one, and the robust continued growth of an important industry as part of that conversation. We've been made aware of issues of increasing use and abuse by our youth, concerns over the looping and the loopholes that exist in the medical marijuana market, and growing concerns about what is called looping specifically, where an individual can buy their daily limit in multiple stores without any flags going up in the system or controls. Those are the sorts of issues that we need to address. I'm very concerned personally about the effects of high potency THC on Coloradans, and I look forward to a productive conversation today, again, as I've described, with many individuals whom I consider friends and thought leaders from their various perspectives. I look forward to an ongoing discussion of this draft of legislation that I believe we can develop into good policy for the people of Colorado. Rep. Caraveo, it's an honor to do this, carry this challenging and controversial bill with you. I, like you, seek good public policy.
Well, thank you, Senator, and I'm very glad to be going down this path with you. So I'm going to start off because a lot of people have questioned, why am I doing this? A lot of people have accused me of being the only person in the state who's concerned about this, that nobody else thinks that there's an issue with high potency THC products. So we're going to start by hearing from some parents, treatment professionals, and physicians who really have encouraged me to run this legislation. After hearing from them, I'm going to provide a quick overview of the draft that hopefully most of you were able to access yesterday. We try to send that out at least 24 hours in advance. And then I'm going to open up for discussion and feedback. John Henry, my aide, is going to be helping me answer your questions and take your feedback in the chat, because I'm here mainly to listen. So he's going to handle the chat. Please raise your hand so that we can call on you for your feedback. And I'm also going to lay some ground rules. I'm used to carrying controversial bills. I've taken on oil and gas. I've taken on tobacco. I've taken on the religious right with comprehensive sex ed. And my chief goal in all of these discussions, as I take on something controversial, is for there to be a respectful discussion around these issues. So I please ask in particular, Senator Lundeen and I have signed up for this. We're used to getting criticism, but a lot of the people who are here did not sign up for this. They are parents and doctors who are just advocating for their kids and for their patients. And then a lot of you who have a livelihood that could be impacted by limitations on the industry. So on both sides, I would ask that everybody be respectful towards each other. Do not impugn each other's motives. Do not question why people are coming into this discussion. And I do reserve the right, if anybody is profane, to mute you. So with that, I'm going to start it off the discussion with Dr. Ken Finn, because I know he's waiting to go back into surgery. So let's go ahead and start with you, Doctor.
And I hate to interrupt Rep. Caraveo, but I want to point out that a number of the parents who wanted to be in on this call apparently are having trouble getting through the waiting room. So I just want to call that out. Hopefully we'll be able to cycle through and get more people in the conversation. But a number of parents with specific personal concerns apparently have not been able to get in. Wanted to call that out. Doctor, I apologize for interrupting you.
No worries. Thank you both for starting the conversation. I'm grateful for the opportunity. And as just a quick background on myself, I'm a pain physician in Colorado Springs. I've been practicing here for over 25 years. I served on the governor's task force for Amendment 64, the Consumer Safety and Social Issues Work Group, and spent 4 years on our state's Medical Marijuana Scientific Advisory Council. The reason I went down this road is because I was having a lot of concerns regarding patients of mine presenting on high dose opioids, high levels of pain, and using marijuana for pain. So it didn't make any sense to me why, what was working, what wasn't working. So I did a lot of education and research, and not as a career choice, became an expert on marijuana. Although I may come across as a nihilist, I'm not. I actually have made marijuana recommendations for some of my terminally ill and suffering patients. But the concerns I have, and I thank you for bringing up this bill because it does highlight many issues. And I'm going to focus on the issues that I have because I think you have some other experts that are better at addressing the potency issues, which is a huge issue. My issue is really the fact that the doctor-patient relationships are poor. There's no documentation regarding maintaining medical records. And in Section 7 of this bill, they outline the requirement to have a bona fide patient-physician relationship and maintaining medical records. In my experience, I can never get medical records from medical patients' caregivers or the centers that they got. And as an example, I actually went and got my own medical marijuana card, and it took 60 seconds to be approved. This part of the bill and this part of the industry really needs to be cinched up to prevent the issues like you addressed with high potency marijuana that is impacting our youth, having a drain on the healthcare system. And I think it needs to be better addressed so we can take better care of our patients from a public health and safety perspective. So I'm going to try to keep it fairly brief. One final issue regarding the opioid epidemic. I can tell you that it has not impacted marijuana expansion and commercialization has not impacted our opioid epidemic. And actually, since marijuana legalization, prescription opioid deaths have increased by 90%. Fentanyl deaths have increased by 700%. Methamphetamine deaths have increased by 280%. Cocaine deaths have increased by 160%. And heroin deaths have increased by 15%. So it's not helping our opioid epidemic. And we need to kind of reel this in from a public health and safety perspective. And so thank you for spearheading this bill. I hope we can have a healthy and productive conversation on this. And again, I'm not a nihilist. I actually have lots of patients on medical marijuana for their pain and suffering.
Thank you, Dr. Finn. Thanks for what you do for your patients. And we'll let you get back to your practice when you need to, but thank you for joining us. And then that brings me to one point. Since there are 100 of us on this meeting, and the doctor did this perfectly, if you could try to limit your comments to 2 to 3 minutes, that would be wonderful to give everybody an opportunity to share their views. Next, we'll go to Laura Steck.
Thanks very much, and thanks for starting this conversation. I live in Highlands Ranch, Colorado, and a little over a year ago, my son Johnny, who was 19, died by suicide. He was using high potency dabs. He started using marijuana when he was 14 because he told me he went to a high school party and he came home and said there was one of his friend's brothers was 18 and he was a senior there and had a med card, and they were all wanting to get high. And so we have struggled over the last 5 years. We tried to intervene in therapies, and he had a 4.0 GPA. He had a scholarship to Colorado State University. He got a perfect SAT score in math. You know, he ran cross country, he played piano, he was in karate. He was just your typical kid. And he went to Colorado State University on his scholarship, and he had a roommate who moved from Michigan to Colorado so that he could smoke weed. And he texted me about 2 weeks in and said he'd been dabbing with his friend Eli for 2 weeks nonstop and that he wanted to kill himself. And so we had to disenroll him from school and put him in the mental hospital. He had a first suicide attempt. They sent him back to the mental hospital, and his diagnosis was THC abuse severe. He recovered from that and was sober for 4 months and thought he could go back to school. So we tried the University of Northern Colorado Greeley, and he did well there initially, and unfortunately went back to dabbing. And we could see after he died in his Snapchat for Your Eyes Only video, him dabbing with his friends and selfies of himself And then we discovered that he had also gotten a med card, and now he was full circle, and he was also providing marijuana to young children. So I just want everybody to understand that, stronger punishments for those selling to people under 21 don't really work, because the teens are getting it from other teens and they just go get their med cards. It's been very easy for them to do. They also have very sophisticated fake IDs that they get from China, and they scan. And so he called me in the middle of the night and said that the mob was after him and that UNC was really an FBI base, and he jumped off a 6-story building. And so I just want everybody to understand that the harms to the young mind are very real, and that there is science out there showing that there is a 5-fold increase in psychosis when you start young on high potency, high frequency. And I just beg you to please put some guardrails in place to protect our young people. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Stack, and I'm so sorry for your loss, but thank you for sharing with us today. I'll go next to Dr. Libby. I think it's Stoit. Once again, if we can limit to like 2 to 3 minutes to get as many people in.
Okay, yes, let's, Dr. Libby Stout. I really appreciate you starting this conversation and recognizing that we do have a serious problem with high potency THC. I am a board certified addiction psychiatrist. For the past 20 years, have been the medical director for the CIRCLE program, which is a 90-day inpatient treatment program funded by the state of Colorado. Most of that time was at the state hospital, then it's been in Crossroads in Pueblo more recently. And in the last 5 years, I've seen increasing problems with this high potency THC. And my biggest concern has been the fact that we have allowed these very high potency products as concentrates to be marketed and sold as medicine, where there is absolutely no research at all on wax, shad, or dab as being an effective treatment for any medically diagnosed condition. And there's no evidence that it's safe. However, there is a great deal of research, and I would dispute that people say there's no research from around the world on high potency THC. And the Dutch figured this out pretty quickly, well before we did, when their plant THC potency got up to 20%, as ours is now currently, average about 20%. They found that there was a lag time, but there was a need for increased admissions for cannabis use disorder, for significantly more people become addicted with the higher potency products. And they actually in 2016 put out a report saying that they thought anything greater than 15% should be considered a hard drug like cocaine, and they capped their potency. There is also multiple studies from around the world showing that high potency greater than 15% has a significant increase for psychosis. When people are using the stuff greater than 15%, there's a 3 times increased risk for psychosis. If they're using it daily, there's a 5 times increased risk for psychosis. We have multiple studies showing that. And now we have multiple events in Colorado, as you addressed, with cannabis hyperemesis syndrome, which seems to be flooding emergency rooms. It does seem to be related to the higher potency, increasing addiction and causing more problems. The other thing that I'm seeing very concerning is this very high correlation with suicide. And granted, correlation does not mean causation, but that's why you do research to try and determine what is the cause of something that seems to be so strongly associated. And right now, in teen suicides in Colorado, THC is the #1 drug present in teen suicides. So these are things that are very concerning to me. And as Laura Stack said, kids are getting these through medical cards. And I've seen many of these young people with medical cards that I do not think they have debilitating illnesses. They have figured out how to say things like, I have migraine headaches, very hard to diagnose. But anyway, I'll stop at this point, and I really appreciate the fact that you're starting this conversation and people are starting to listen. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. We'll go next to Lindsay Neal. Please remember, try to stay to 2 to 3 minutes.
Representative Caraveo. Good morning, my name is Lindsay. I am a lifelong child advocate, having previously worked for organizations like the Colorado Children's Campaign and Stand for Children, as well as serving as the director of the Office of Children's Affairs for Mayor Michael Hancock. I'm a former lobbyist and the mother of an 18-year-old Latino son named Chris, who is addicted to high-potency marijuana. Chris attended middle and high school in Denver public schools, attending schools where more than 90% of the students, like him, were students of color. I'm talking about schools in Cole and Northwest Denver. High-potency marijuana from dispensaries, it was and is regularly sold by young adults on middle and high school campuses across Colorado, easily making its way into the hands of our young people. Chris's journey to high-potency marijuana began in middle school with vaping, then smoking bud marijuana, then on to dabbing with wax. At his worst, Chris pushed his 11-year-old brother into oncoming traffic on the corner of 8th and Quebec for having told on him for using. As a family, we lived in isolation, in fear, and in shame. 2 weeks after his 16th birthday, he ran away, and when we found him, we had him picked up by the police and returned to our home, where we lived on lockdown until we could have him transported in the middle of the night to a therapy program outside of the state. He spent 90 days in a wilderness program, 16 months in a therapeutic boarding program, and 5 months in a step-down program that he promptly signed himself out of after turning 18. We spent over $250,000 on his treatment that we had, thanks to family members and honestly the grace of God. Most parents don't know about high-potency marijuana and its impacts. Schools are ill-equipped and under-resourced to intervene, and it's causing a public health crisis among our youth. I'll leave you with my final 2 thoughts. 1, it's the state's responsibility to protect public health and safety. None of the parents here are calling for a ban on marijuana or not having it available for the patients who need it. We're asking you to put basic safety measures in place for the short and long-term benefit of our kids and communities. Number 2, this is not something just affecting white families, but it is more likely that white families have access to resources for treatment for their children. I've heard people claim that adding regulations to the industry will disproportionately impact communities of color. From my experience, what is having a detrimental impact on young people of color, like my son, is the fact that grow houses and dispensaries are located in the heart of these communities, and dispensary products are easy to access, combined with the fact that treatment is hard to find and afford. In my son's 2 years of treatment, there were only 2 other young men of color in any of the programs he attended. To this day, we count ourselves as one of the lucky families, and yet we know that could change at any moment. My son Chris is not alone. He is not the exception. Both he and we as a family will have to deal with this for the rest of our lives. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll go to one more speaker, and then I'm going to do a brief overview of the bill, and then we will open up for everybody else to comment. So Ben Court.
Hi, thank you very much. I'll be as brief as possible. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of a small treatment program for chemical dependency and mental health in the mountains, consultant to professional and collegiate chemical dependency, who's a father with 3 public schools in Schuster, Weed Inc. 2017. And on the board of directors for NowGap, the National Association of Lesbian, Gay, Transgender, Bisexual Treatment Providers. As a treatment provider in the state of Colorado, what I'd like everybody to understand is that this has been good for our business because more people are seeking treatment for THC dependency. It has, however, been very, very detrimental to the individuals seeking those treatment and to our state. The high potency THC is the issue. There's an old adage that the most dangerous part about weed is getting caught with it. And until potency started to be 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 99%, that was fairly true. The problem is that these high potency products that we have no understanding of what's taking place inside of the human brain and body, aside from the fact that they appear to be contributing significantly to mental health disorders. And as Dr. Stout said, we have significant peer-reviewed, journal-published evidence showing such. We have constantly been asked to prove that they are unsafe rather than the sellers be asked to prove that they are safe. High-potency THC makes our jobs harder, period. And we hope that the state will finish what it has started and bring it back to what is actually a normal and acceptable amount of THC in these products, rather than this highly manufactured and detrimental product that is being sold in Colorado, and that the industry has become dependent on selling in Colorado. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So with that, I'm going to go over the bullet points on this initial draft. And so really the bill addresses three main areas. The first is that it creates a medical marijuana monitoring program to limit abuse and to stop looping and ensure the constitutionally required bona fide patient-doctor relationship. The second part is that we'll look at data collection to better track the effects of high-potency THC. And then the third part of it is protecting the public health through potency limits and prohibition of dangerous products used by underage youth. So for those of you who have the bill in front of you, we'll go through section by section. Section 2 includes definitions. That starts on page 3. It defines medical marijuana and recreational shatter and wax. Section 3 looks at packaging requirements. It starts on page 4. The section aligns current packaging standards for the edible recreational market to all products. Currently, the packaging for retail edible products is 10 milligrams of active ingredient with 10 per serving and no more than 100 milligrams per package. And so this bill, as it stands at this time, would align all products to the same standard. Section 4 looks at marijuana tracking, creating a marijuana tracking system through seed to sale. It starts at the top of page 5. This section requires additional information to be input into the seed to sale tracking system, with really the goal being to allow enforcement of the daily limits. Section 5 looks at product protections for medical marijuana. It starts on page 11, and it places guardrails around medical marijuana products by ensuring that products do not contain human carcinogens, prohibits shatter and wax. It contains a THC potency cap at that 15% that we are starting at, and requires product labeling for the ingredients in the product, and prohibits advertising and labeling using brand name products. Section 6 looks at protections for cultivation. It starts on page 13. This section prohibits cultivation facilities from using known carcinogens in the cultivation of these products. Section 7 starts on page 13 and looks at product protections for manufacture. Once again, limiting human carcinogen use in the manufacture of products. Section 8 looks at protections for retail marijuana. It starts on page 13 as well. This section places guardrails around retail products by ensuring that products do not contain carcinogens, same as the other, looks at shatter wax suppositories and the potency limit. Section 9 looks at physician authorization, which we've talked about today, starts on page 14. And so it's intended to ensure that medical marijuana is treated more like medicine. It requires that a doctor create an authorization that contains important medical information like we do for any other medicine that we recommend or prescribe. So it will include the date, patient's name and address, physician's name, address, and DEA number, potency level being recommended, the dosage form, the quantity authorized, the directions for use, the number of refills, and the signature of the physician. And it would also require the physician to keep patient records and states that they can authorize the use of medical marijuana within the scope of their practice. Section 10 looks at emergency room data. On page 16, requires CDPHE to create a report compiled from emergency room data on conditions or diagnosis reflecting marijuana use, and it requires that this report be provided to the legislature. Of course, that data would be de-identified and aggregated to ensure privacy. And then section 11 looks at death data, starts on page 17, and it would require coroners to order toxicology screens in suicides, overdose deaths, and accidental deaths, and required that that information be submitted to CDPHE, also de-identified and in an aggregated form. And then section 12 is a safety clause that's on page 17, and it denotes when the bill would take effect. So with that, I will open it up for a general discussion. Once again, 2 to 3 minutes. And I've been informed that there has been some impugning of motives in the chat, so I will once again advise people to be respectful in this dialogue. So John Henry, I think you've been looking over the chat mainly, and so I'll turn it over to you to start calling on people.
Yeah, so I think we can go down the, so again, please raise your hand if you would like to ask a question. It creates a queue, kind of like a stack that we can go through. It is hard to keep up with the chat, so please raise your hand. I will also try, and if you message me directly, I can help. If you just raise a hand, great, thank you. All right, some folks who just direct message me just raised their hand. Again, please please use the raise hand function. Just helps me out a lot. So thank you. We'll go Anna, Michelle, Veronica, Melissa, and then Hashim for the first 5. And please limit your comments to, again, a couple, 2 to 3 minutes. Thank you.
Okay, I think I'm first then. So thank you very much. My name is Anna Kim. I am the Executive Director for NAMI. We're the National Alliance on Mental Illness of Boulder County. We provide education, support, and advocacy for individuals and families impacted by mental illness. And we support this bill because of the personal stories that we hear every single week from families in our community. They report that their loved ones had no prior mental health symptoms until they started using cannabis and then went into psychosis. The frequent mention of dabbing and psychosis in the same sentence is really what led us to getting involved in this issue, which we weren't even aware of before. The two terms are definitely said together so frequently that we know people in our community are personally experiencing what the research is showing to be true, that there's a connection between high potency concentrates and psychosis. So thank you very much for supporting this bill.
All right, we'll go Michelle.
Hi, thank you so much for giving me an opportunity to speak. I want to start by giving my condolences to the mothers who spoke earlier about how THC may have affected their children's mental illness or what happened afterwards. As parents, we have to stand together on this issue, and I just want to give you my condolences. My son also has been affected by high potency, medical grade, therapeutic levels of THC. My son is also a young man of color. However, my son's life has been saved by this plant. Nothing else helped my son. We've tried the full gamut of pharmaceutical medications. My son seized every 10 seconds. My son has, sorry, I'll wait for that to mute. My son has level 3 autism, and he was very aggressive towards himself and towards others. And cannabis has allowed him to speak. He is now verbal. He no longer attacks himself and others, and he no longer seizes. In the most truest sense, my son is alive because of THC. And the limits placed in this bill would really affect my child and other patients in the state of Colorado negatively. 15% is an arbitrary number. I don't know why we're discussing high potency and how this is adulterated when it's still a plant. It's still unadulterated as a plant, and I'm really concerned about that. We've also had mention of higher usage by high school students, but that simply isn't accurate. CDPHE's own studies have found that high school usage has remained steady for almost a decade and a half. So I don't see the data that is driving this information. I have concerns about privacy. I have concerns about doctors recommending dosing, because that's a very fine line. Recommending dosing is prescribing, and prescribing is illegal because unfortunately cannabis is still Schedule 1. And these are just a few of my concerns. And I know some of the other patients and individuals on the other side of this bill will share some more, but I just want to reach out and share that this would affect my child very negatively. It could kill my son. So please, as we discuss children, I ask that we remember not only those that have been negatively affected, but also those whose lives have been saved. Thank you all.
Thanks, Michelle.
We'll go to Veronica, then Melissa, then Hashim, then Letitia, then Pamela, then Stacy, then Byron, and down to Kara, and then Ivani. And also there's some folks who are having trouble raising their hand. So after Ivani, I'm gonna just put this to give them an opportunity. So after Ivani, Chris Rogers, and then Bridget Sarrett. So since you seems like y'all are having trouble with raising the hand function. So just FYI, whoever raises their hand after Ivani, we got 2 folks. And also got a request, can everyone mute who isn't talking? Yes, thank you.
Okay, so this is Veronica Carpio. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Hi, thank you. I appreciate the time to be able to make a comment. I did send in a bunch of questions. I'm not sure if those will get be addressed. Some may no longer be relevant, but my name is Veronica Carpio. I'm with Grow Hemp, Colorado. I am also a mother, a grandmother, as well as a medical marijuana patient. And I would like to say the following. This bill, as it stands now, is opening Pandora's box, and it does nothing to help protect the youth of Colorado as being claimed. In fact, what this bill will do, if passed, it will open up a doorway to more restrictions on both access and limits of other cannabinoids and cannabinoid-based products beyond THC. As mentioned on a recent town hall Representative Caraveo hosted, she stated that she has patients that are using CBD. CBD and THC are both cannabinoids from the cannabis plant. Both cannabinoids are psychoactive and have mind-altering effects. It is true that CBD is not psychoactive like THC, but still is a profound mood-altering substance. CBD is also considered by FDA a drug and available by prescription only. If we force a limit on THC for extracts or flower material for any legal responsible adult consumer, the next step will inevitably be putting limits on CBD, CBG, CBDV, THCV, etc. for flower and concentrates. And this really is just not acceptable now or in the future. It is also important to note that current CBD products, which are treated and regulated like food here in Colorado, commonly use butane and other types of solvents to extract. These solvents have been regulated in a way which is safe for human consumption and use. So if we already do this with CBD products and provide safe allowances, being more restrictive for marijuana products is unreasonable and without merit. Additionally, any testing by the coroners or tracking system should also include all cannabinoids, not just THC, but all cannabinoids, if this bill were to move forward. And I can assure you that this would be received with heavy resistance by the whole cannabis industry, both hemp and marijuana, and Colorado consumers. It is also critical to clarify that we do not have a marijuana abuse epidemic here in Colorado. We do have a meth, fentanyl, flocka, and heroin epidemic affecting our Colorado youth, which should be the focus of any legislation, not limits on THC for legal adult consumers. In conclusion, this bill is a no-go, and it will have severe impacts in Colorado in multiple negative ways, which I believe is the direct opposite of what the bill sponsor is trying to accomplish. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Veronica.
Melissa, we'll go. So the next 3 are Melissa, Hashim, Letitia.
Yes, thank you. And thank you to the bill sponsors. And I am begging you to cap potency. My son started using high potency as a result of being introduced to an edible at a Boy Scout camp out. He was not seeking it. He was at a wholesome activity. It's very accessible and available to our youth. We were very concerned by the use of his high potency. We sought counseling. We were asked whether or not we had a zero tolerance or if it was helping with his anxiety and he was reaching his milestones, what could be the harm? The harm was about a month after being introduced to dabbing, my son had a psychotic break. If any of you have ever experienced this or been around someone you love, it is awful. It is a derail of a life of a young person. I really believe that our youth and their future is at stake. We were lucky enough to get very good care for him, but we are one of the few families that can afford it, that has had some success, but he will struggle with his mental health and need to be on some very restrictive treatment for the rest of his life. We were very transparent in our journey, and there was not one person I shared our story with that did not have a direct experience or know of somebody who was experiencing the same problems with teen use of high potency marijuana and the resulting mental crisis that our representative from NAMI reports. And I just beg you to please cap the potency and save our youth. Thank you.
Great, thank you. We'll go to Hashim next, and then Letitia, then Pamela, Stacy, Byron, Kara, Avani. And then after Avani, we have some folks who weren't able to raise their hand due to some issues they're having on their Zooms, but I will explain that as we get to Avani, just the order then. But we'll just continue to get down the line of folks who have raised their hand. So Hashim, you're next.
Cool, thank you very much. Thank you, Representative, for this opportunity to speak. I'm sorry, I'm trying to compose myself, and it's hard sometimes for me to speak on this, being in this room, and I'm hearing some, and I've heard some, what I would label as faux concern from non-Black voices as it relates to the harms of Black communities with this product. Being a child that lived through the war on drugs and lived through the Just Say No campaign, yikes, right? So I want my comments to be poignant, but I don't want to be combative with them. But we're blaming cannabis for social issues, especially as it relates to what society gives us. And sometimes cannabis is the treatment of the symptom that is being caused by psychological issues that society has caused. So I feel that this is an attack on treating something that is not even an issue. But I want to be completely clear, absolutely crystal clear, that the mental health issues of young people, ranging from inspiration to defeat, especially including depression and addiction, are important to everyone, inside and outside of the cannabis industry. But it's important that we learn from our past mistakes, not to treat everything like a hammer. There are times when you must use other tools to give the precision of a scalpel or the comfort of a hug or a warm blanket. This is not the scalpel. This is the hammer to the issue. I represent the Black and Brown Badge Red organization in the cannabis industry. We are part of many of organizations who see the harm that this bill will cause to the industry, but more importantly, what it would cause to society. It will set us back in the years of struggle towards equity and economic prosperity and growth in the industry that is dominated by white males. It's already a struggle for Black and Brown businesses in regular, typical uphill American times to succeed. But this bill being put out in its intent for good will actually create more harm to these industries and to societies. I am a proud lifelong Democrat, and I was actually the 2020 Democratic Volunteer of the Year Award recipient. I'm concerned that these intentions, are coming out of our party during the time of an epidemic, right? During the time of an epidemic when we know that there are people who require the potencies to just live and survive. This is actually a blow at empathy. And this is set up to tout people on display to testify, people who have illnesses, suffer with disease, are immune compromised, and living with other disabilities. This is not us. As humanity has taught us to be empathetic, I want to address some of the concerns that are based in the misinformation out there. This bill will not prevent young people from accessing marijuana concentrates. When all the marijuana of the world was illegal for hundreds of years, it was still easily accessible to high school and college students. forcing a segment of marijuana products back into the illicit market will not prevent today's youth from getting it. In fact, it will make it easier. This will create an illicit market for marijuana concentrates. And we already know what illicit markets do to people, family, and communities. These illicit markets make not just Black and brown communities the worst targets, but it also targets all communities. And I say that because if public safety is your concern, understand that prior to the regulated market absorbing the demand for marijuana concentrates, Colorado saw a significant number of hash home oil explosions. This is a product that is now safe to produce in a professional regulated facility. But if you drive that demand back to the illicit markets community, will not be safe. A neighborhood that is mixed with people who do not participate in marijuana will now be in a form of danger, jeopardized to the illicit market, creating its own hash oil. I ask for you, Representative, to actually withdraw this bill. I ask for us to have better conversations before such things are created. We must look at the effects of society that has caused our youth to have such issues, that have caused them to turn to marijuana as a coping mechanism. I was born, I was raised, and I grew up around all types of drugs, but it was the love that I received from my single mother family, right? My single mother home and my family and community that helped me make the wise choices, that helped me to cope with all of the ills that society gave me. Thank you very much for your time.
All righty, we'll go Letitia, Pamela, Stacy, Byron, Kara, Ivani. And also, if I mispronounce your name, I preemptively apologize. Just trying to quickly read down the Zooms. Wonderful, we'll go to Letitia next.
Hi, I'm Dr. Letitia Bader. I'm a Chief Clinical Officer for Women's Recovery. It's an IOP substance use program in the Denver area. I've been treating addiction, so I'm on the other side of it for Frontlines for more than 16 years now, and was inpatient literally when the turn in the Great Square State, when the turn of legalization of the industry happened. That's where I want to be talking to you today is from the front lines of the treatment industry, as well as for women specifically. I hear the ails that happen for many of our communities, and that's what I get to hear on a firsthand basis. Just a reminder that this substance, especially once we get into large potency to high potency, changes our bodies, especially for women. So because of this specific composition of this substance, it has a telescoping effect on women. We usually start with lower levels of substance. And for us, starting on concentrates is a story that is not all that unheard of. And so when we start low, even if we go slow, starting at this higher potency and moving the needle up so quickly with concentrates this high is the part that is very detriment to use. Our body composition also is different. And so for women, because of that, the higher body fat, the lower volume of water and the gastric enzymes, we process this substance differently, even than other substances of opiates and alcohol. But this telescoping effect on women has about a 2-to-1 ratio of the impact of our bodies. I tell you that because this drug is literally harder on women's bodies. That is if we are in it by ourselves. So we'll talk about pregnancy in a second, but I just want to tell you the stories that I hear that make it difficult for this substance, especially at high potencies, and especially kind of the unregulated nature of how we can get it and get our hands on it, is also the withdrawal impact. And so we know that cannabis withdrawals happen very quickly. In our program, all we're asking is for a chance, even just for 90 days, to try not to use a substance. We're not abstinence ready, and we're not asking that for the rest of our lives, but just to see if we can stop using a substance for a brief period of time. And our women find it very difficult to stop using cannabis. This withdrawal, as noted now in the DSM, is that it peaks at day 4 and lasts for 16 days. And so being able to support a woman in order to get the substance out of her body for that period of time is quite challenging. Not only with the thoughts that are happening, but just the biological nature of getting this substance out of our bodies. And so the last thing I just wanted to note is the difference that the industry has given us for the message of pregnancy. Marijuana is in fact the most common illicit drug used in pregnancy. And even in a brief period of time, the NSDHU annual report that came out said something that was surprising to me and heart-stopping at times. But pregnant women from the age of 15 to 44, just in 2 years, their usage has gone from a 3.4, it said that they would report using cannabis during the last month, up to 7.1. I'm not great with math, so the math, it was there for me. It was 108% increase in 2 years. And I do believe that that is because the industry is giving a message that cannabis is safe. It's safe for women. It's safe for all the ailments that go along with many of the concerns of pregnancy, for nausea, right? For many of the symptoms that can be managed within a natural state or even by our physicians and ourselves and our nutrition. It's just in the scary part. That's all I wanted to say is any cap that can be given and any industry regulation that can help with women specifically. And my concerns go out to the generation that we have now. And I'm also looking to the generation that we are having as women for pregnancy, is that we will now produce a generation that struggles from in utero with this substance, as well as at delivery, that children and babies are having withdrawal effects because it freely crosses the placenta, and we haven't gotten into breastfeeding. And that's just mine. Just please consider women as well for the concerns that are being addressed.
Great. We'll go to Pamela next, and then Stacy.
Okay, I'm here. I'm just a patient here in Colorado that I came from Mississippi to seek legal access to cannabis. And one thing I noticed when I arrived in Colorado is there's not one doctor here that could tell me very much about cannabis. And as I reached out to my doctors and started using cannabis, nobody could tell me how much cannabis to use on a daily basis for my issues. So I had to take it on myself as to what potency I needed. And so what I done was took the cannabis that I was using and took it to my doctors and let them test this, and then start seeing the test results from where I had used the cannabis. And it seemed to me like we started seeing results when I reached 1,000 milligrams on the cannabis daily. And when you start trying to cap this potency, you're also capping our full extract cannabis oil, or our FICO, which most patients need to survive. So I'm really concerned about this cap that you're trying to put on it for people like myself. And the issue was brought up about it being in your system and how hard it is to get off of. Well, I can honestly say that getting off of fentanyl was much worse than trying to get cannabis out of my system. And I have done both. And the side effects from the opioids are just scary to me. And I think we all should have this option. And that's what Colorado's about, having options to take care of ourselves. And that's mainly all I got to say about this, but I'm very concerned that my livelihood could be placed at risk now with this bill.
Thanks, Pamela. John, really quick before you call on the next person. Pamela, I really appreciate you including what the dose is. Any of you who are patients, if you could include what your daily dose is, what if you use high potency substances, what that potency is, because we've had difficulty getting that information specifically from patients. So I really appreciate that as we reconsider parts of the bill.
Thank you.
All right, we'll go to Stacy and then Byron and then Kara are the next three.
Hi, I want to first thank the bill sponsors for your courage to address this issue, this difficult issue. I am a parent of 2 boys, 16 and 18, who've lived in Colorado. We moved to Colorado for the healthy living and lifestyle for our children. Our focus has always been mental, physical, emotional well-being. We are very attentive parents. We do not consume any drugs. We barely have an occasional Tylenol or glass of wine. So I just want to take that off the table. This is not about, blame the parents. I naively assumed that there would be guardrails to and around marijuana to protect the community, and especially our young people. I certainly did not know, again, naively, that legalization would include a new hard drug form of THC. Freshman year of high school, actually in 8th grade, my son had easy access to high potency THC. These drugs are widely used at his high school. He has started with the flavors, the very appealing to children flavored drugs, edibles, moved to dab, shatter, wax very quickly, which he had access through 18-year-old classmates with medical cards who were not sick. He can attest to that. They very easily got those cards. This is not like trying a beer or the 3% THC of 10 to 15 years ago. He quickly went from being an A to B student to becoming addicted, using the rigs and the torches, high all day, not going to school. He has been through 3 rehabs. The best insurance does not cover the long tail of this, the cost of this disease and the diseases resulting from high potency THC. What disease? He has suffered neural pathway damage. And while he's been clean for over a year, he continues to experience incidents, ongoing medical, serious mental health issues. And this will go on indefinitely. The whole family has suffered. I am a very private person. I don't talk with a lot of people about what we've been through. And there is, as we can see in the chat, there's a lot of blame and labeling and shame associated with this. But among the very few people that I have talked to, I directly know of 5 other parents of teens and young adults with hyperemesis, cannabis-induced psychosis, and have been through inpatient rehabs. This is a problem. This is a community problem. My son has said he knows more teens, more of his peers who are high potency THC addicts than any other drug right now. Now, while you might have data that's older than this is what's happening now. He has confirmed the ease of looping by friends who have given him and sold shatter and wax to him and many other kids. This was not what I voted for. I'm upset that our teens and young adults, really our whole community, have become the lab rats where children and young adults are expected to single-handedly battle a powerful industry and its hard drug that has been, for all intents and purposes, disguised and marketed as natural and made illogically accessible. I'm a person of color too. This is not a hammer, it's reason. We set guardrails on crack and opioids. We set the guardrails. Please, for the sake of our community, please set up these basic common sense guardrails around potency and accessibility of a hard drug. Nobody's saying, let's remove it from medical use. Nobody's saying eliminate it. Just let's please use common sense and help the people that are increasingly going to suffer in our community. Thank you.
Alrighty, so once again, just a quick reminder for folks, if you're not speaking, or just make sure to mute, just because there's background noise. So definitely, thank you so much. All right, so we'll go to Byron, Kara, Avani, and then after that, we have some folks who weren't able to raise their hands in the chat, so I apologize, Julie. We have 2 people between you and Avani, and so I've been keeping notes on the folks who've reached out who couldn't raise their hand, but I just want to make sure that those folks are still able to get their voices heard. All right, so we'll go to Byron.
Hi, it's Brian. The R is before the Y.
Oh, sorry, my apologies.
It happens all the time, so no problem. I've been an addiction psychiatrist for 35 plus years. I'm here speaking for both the legislative committee of the Colorado Psychiatric Society, and I'm executive vice president of Doctors for Cannabis Regulation. I've published a couple hundred articles on the biology of treatment of addiction. I'm editor of the American Journal of Alcohol and Drug Abuse. That's enough. So I want to touch on a bunch of things that are on the bill, even things that were on the bill that are no longer on the bill. from all the people I've talked to about the bill over all the doctors I've talked to over the last couple of days. In terms of the limits on THC concentration, this is obviously a very emotional issue on both sides. And the physicians that I've talked to, we tend to go with what the CDPHE report from 2020 said, which is they concluded this is a problem. It seems to be maybe a serious problem, but we don't have the data yet to say where should we cut it off, 15, 30, 50, 80. We just don't know. So this is the problem, and what we do need is more research. So it was mentioned earlier, there's no data to support high dose, high potency as a treatment. That's because it's not allowed by the US government. The federal government only allows us to do research with cannabis that has been obtained from the University of Mississippi farms that only supply it at 10%, maybe 15%. There has never been any research done on high potency, and unless things change, there won't be. So there's an issue with the potency, but we just don't know where to cut it off. And if we cut it off, as was mentioned, will this help in the long run? We've made a lot of drugs illegal. It doesn't necessarily help. In terms of prescribing requirements, it's both sides. On the one hand, we don't want the government intruding on practice of medicine. There's questions about, can you even recommend specific dosages, or how often, et cetera? Is the data there to support that? On the other hand, the medical field is not monitoring the situation as it is for regular medications. So if we're not doing our job, maybe the government needs to step in. So I don't really have, I can argue both sides of that. There's several issues that some, as I mentioned, that were on the bill, some aren't anymore, but I want to bring them up. All physicians I've talked to, billboards, banning billboards sounds like a great idea. If we're not doing it for nicotine, not allowing it for nicotine and alcohol, then why should it be there for cannabis? Vending machines, I don't know how that became a thing, and that was recent. It seems, I'd like to see them banned. Flavored vapes should be banned. Prohibiting carcinogens, sure, that makes sense. Of course, there's a question, how are we defining a carcinogen? What lab is testing it? And I still don't know if Colorado has third-party testing. Who is testing the labs to make sure that they are measuring correctly? So it's not a problem. Listing ingredients certainly should be done. Packaging into discrete dosages, again, no problem with that. Everyone has also agreed that the ER should not be requiring, it's essentially requiring testing of cannabis. The data, I mean, it's so hard to make sense of that data on the one hand, because cannabis lasts so long in the body. It's legislating medical practice, and it's an unfunded mandate. Who's going to pay for all these extra tests? How are you going to make sure it's done? ERs are already pushed as it is enough. Thank you.
All right, we'll go to Kara, Avani, and then after Avani, two folks who were struggling to raise their hand, Chris Rogers and Bridget Sarrett. Then we'll go to Julie, and then I will provide an update after Avani. Just for, again, we'll go Kara, Avani, Chris Rogers, Bridget Sarrett, and then Julie.
And then just a really quick clarification, let's try to limit this to 2 to 3 minutes. We've been letting people go over, but there's still a lot of people who want to talk, and we're about 24 minutes out from our slated time. I can go a little bit over, but I don't think anybody can, not everybody can. So thank you.
And also a couple people raised their hand after messaging me. I think Truman and Jason, you two kind of knocked yourselves down the order a bit. So just FYI, you'll be speaking sooner than what's said on my stack, just FYI. But we'll go to Ivani. Or sorry, Carol, my apologies.
Hi, thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to have some discussion around this. I want to start by saying I work for the marijuana industry group and am coordinating with a lot of other business associations and groups to keep an ongoing discussion. This is not a new discussion. Part of this has been framed as thank you for starting a discussion, but this is an ongoing discussion that's been going on for years. The CDPHE has been working on this for years, so is the MED, so have local health public agencies. We have concerns. The proposals in the bill do not reflect any of the recommendations that CDPHE has put forward, even in their most recent study from this summer on THC concentrates. I don't feel that the bill keeps any marijuana, much less high potency marijuana, out of the hands of kids. And that really needs to be the focus. Industry is completely on board with helping to do that and wanting to do that. We are in full support of the CDPHE's recommendations around high potency marijuana and all of their recommendations that they've been moving forward with in multiple studies, working with the Healthy Kids Colorado survey, with the MEOC group, with the DUID, with the Science and Policy Advisory Group. All of these have been established and running for years, and those are the ones that we're probably going to be able to support. I have a fear, and it's shared amongst industry, that passage of this bill and the different components within it, even though I'm going to tell you a number of the components, packaging, labeling, advertising restrictions, making sure that there aren't testing for residual solvents, all of those things currently exist. So some of the things that you're talking about already exist in regulation and in statute, but passage of this drives it back into the black market. There's a thriving black market. What we need to do is make sure that regulated market, who is testing, packaging, labeling, keeping it away from kids with a 97% compliance rate, and working on education programs and youth prevention and treatment addiction programs, continues to be the path forward. Because if you try and put these artificial caps on, you will drive it back to the black market, and we have no controls, and there is no protection for kids or anybody else in that market. So we look forward to continuing this conversation and working with the state health agency to enact their public health recommendations, and would really invite all the folks that are concerned and interested in this bill and the representative and senator who are running this to engage with the public health agencies. They're not on this, neither is the regulatory agency, and we probably need to have them in this discussion. I hope there'll be some additional stakeholder meetings since there were only 100 people allowed in. I know there were quite a few people who were very disappointed they couldn't participate. We will send that recorded link. Thank you for recording it. But I just don't think that there's any room for compromise or support of this bill from our perspective. I'll finish there so other people who are more important can talk.
Really quick, since the black market has been brought up a couple times, sorry, Ivani, to interrupt, but I'm gonna just ask Ray Padilla to give some perspective on data that he has around that, and then we'll go back to the
Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So for those that don't know me, my name is Ray Padilla. I'm the president of the Colorado Drug Investigators Association. And one thing that I would like to discuss is the black market, and this whole thing on it's going to move it straight back to the black market. The black market did nothing but thrive when we legalized marijuana in Colorado. That included flower marijuana as well as concentrates, et cetera. So the fact that if anyone thinks that this cut down anything on the black market, that's absolutely false. We've done nothing but deal with tons of problems driven by the legalization. That's something that was let out of Pandora's box. We're not going to be able to put it back. So now we have to try to regulate it and control it. There are a lot of laws that are fairly strict when it comes to our enforcement of marijuana concentrates and manufacturing in homes and businesses across the state. Will that increase? I don't believe it'll increase that much because we're already dealing with some of it as it is. However, if anyone thinks that someone can manufacture 70 to 99% pure THC inside their homes, not having the sophisticated equipment that the industry has, that's absolutely false as well. We've had hash forever. These things are in homes. We deal with an occasional BHO lab. We don't deal with many of them. It may increase slightly, but there are enforcement mechanisms that we can use to go after those individuals that we've been using already. So will it drive it straight to the black market? I doubt it very seriously. We're already dealing with that issue, but I just want people to understand that, us just regulating this and trying to at least have some kind of controls to prohibit some of this high-grade THC from getting into the hands of the youth and getting into the hands of the individuals that should not be consuming it. Anything we can do to prevent that is probably a great thing for the communities. So from a law enforcement standpoint, I would just say that, we don't anticipate that the black market's going to thrive even more. We understand that it may increase slightly, but we do have mechanisms in place to go after that. And that's all we have at this point. We enjoy listening to all the dialogue, though, and seeing what the thoughts are and trying to come up with solutions to alleviate some of these problems.
Thank you, Ray. We'll go next to Avani.
My name is Avani Dilgar, and I have worked as a substance abuse and mental health counselor in the last 20 years here in the Boulder community. And I want to just talk about my experience that we have here with high THC products. So I work with teens and with adults, and I have never seen the mental health fallout from any other drug that I have been dealing with as we see from high THC products. So we see a very sharp rise in mental health issues like anxiety and addiction and specifically psychosis. And, that's easy to say, right? But if you have never sat with somebody who is in a state of psychosis, it's probably one of the most painful experiences that you can have. And it's very, very difficult and challenging to get a person back. So I spend now all of my days supporting teens with these issues. And the reason you don't know about them is because there's still so much stigma. I applaud Laura and the parents who spoke up, because in our community, barely any parent speaks up when this is happening in their families. There's so much stigma around mental health and psychosis that teens don't walk around saying, I had a psychotic break. Parents don't talk about it. I see this on a daily basis. It's the most painful thing that has ever happened in my career as a counselor. And we need to get the word out that this is a high risk and that we need to protect our teens. And then when people say, well, it's the parents' jobs or the teachers' jobs, it's not fair, because the products that teens are using are very easy to conceal. And the reason I think why high THC products are so appealing to teens is because their use can be concealed very easily, and parents have no chance to see it, find it. Teens used to tell me that kids are using high THC products in the classroom in front of their teachers. And I didn't believe that. I couldn't imagine how would that work until it happened in my own classroom. So that's a problem, that these products can be used in such a concealed way that really no parent, no teacher, no counselor has a chance to monitor that. And then I want to tell you about our experience, when people say, well, we just need to educate the community and the parents. So I run a nonprofit, Natural Highs, in Boulder with teens. And we have been doing this education for the last years and on a very small budget. And we just lost our funding because all youth grants were cut because of COVID. And so, we have no way to get the education out in comparison to $1 billion industry that is advertising that cannabis is good for anxiety. There's such a misunderstanding around how cannabis impacts the teenage brain. One of the biggest concerns that I have as a counselor is that I see teens building tolerance very quickly. I work with teens who are 13 years old, 14 years old, who within months of using cannabis are using high THC concentrates. And because the teenage brain is so vulnerable towards dopamine and tolerance, I see a lot of kids then moving on to other drugs like Xanax and opiates. And we have a situation right now in Boulder where kids are dying from overdoses. And I know that high THC products are part of that picture. And so I just really want to get the word out. I know because of stigma, it's very difficult to get the word out. I see it on a daily basis. And so I want to be a resource to all of you. And I thank you very much for taking on this initiative.
Great, thank you, Ivani. So we have some folks who had trouble raising their hand functions, or for some other reasons they just aren't on the stack here, but they've been reaching out for a while, been super patient. So the next three, just when I call out your name, just be ready to speak. And again, if everyone can keep their comments to 2 minutes, since we want to try and get through as many comments as possible. Right now, I think I have 10 people on the stack, but Chris, Rogers, Bridget, Sarah, and then Tina Marquise. You're the next three, and then we'll go to Julie Richardson and then Sean Rhoda. So that's 1 through 5 on the list right
now. Thanks so much to everybody for showing up. Thanks, Representative Caraveo and Senator Lundeen for getting this going. I think this is high past time. My name is Chris Rogers. I'm a board certified child and adolescent psychiatrist. I work on an inpatient unit at the Medical Center of Aurora, treating acutely psychotic and suicidal teens, the vast majority of which do have cannabis use disorders, the vast majority of which are using high potency products. I'm also speaking on behalf of the Colorado Child and Adolescent Psychiatric Society and Colorado Psychiatric Society, where we have across the board concerns about these high potency products. There's so many intelligent people here sharing some great data, some great opposing opinions. I think it's really important that we state that the psychiatrists, CPS, CCAPs, we're not anti-marijuana. We don't support criminalization. We're not prohibition favored. We think that a sensible marijuana regulation is something that has to happen. We recognize that this bill, like any approach to regulating an industry after the fact, is going to have a lot of waves that it's going to make. There's going to be a lot of dissenting opinions. I would say that the most important thing from today's conversation is that I would love to work with the industry, with the marijuana advocates, to say, what is enough? I think we hear concerns about going to the black market. I never saw black market dealers hooking kids on my unit on dabs. I never saw the black market having gummy bears that were marketed to look like something that kids would enjoy. I never saw black market people providing blowtorch rigs for kids to dab daily. And the evidence that this is bad for our kids, that kids are dying, that kids are having long-ranging mental health impacts, it's not opinion, it's not a publicity stunt, it's not to impugn marijuana or make opiates look good. So if we can just focus on what is reasonable, what is harming our kids, how can we get some information on how to move forward for the rest of the country looks to Colorado, and this is the place we got to start. So hopefully we can be part of a further conversation. I'd love to go on and on about the bill specifics, but that's my 2 minutes, and hopefully we can have some real shared perspective instead of just trying to nitpick each other's point of views, please.
All right, so next we'll go to Bridget, and then Tina, and then Julie Richardson. Again, please keep your comments brief.
Hi, I'm Bridget Surratt, and I am a patient, and I run a nonprofit down in Colorado Springs. We work with about 2,000 families here in Colorado. And I just want to address that, one, a lot of the things in this bill have already been done. If you were to look at the sunset that was just passed, you have contaminants regulations, you have regulations for ppm as far as butane and all of those other substances. And looping in medical is already tracked. So that seems to be a little unusual that it's a problem since it's already tracked. I also want to mention that while I appreciate absolutely the opinions and whatnot of all of our psychological professionals on here, you guys see the worst of the worst. You don't get to see the stuff that's happening in my community where people's lives are being saved by all of this. I would love to see the data that shows exactly how many youth are being adversely affected compared to the number of patients that this is helping. Because no one wants this in the hands of the children who don't need this. This is truly something that is either adult use or for medical patients, and that we agree with. But this bill is a hammer, and it doesn't accomplish taking it out of the hands of children in any way whatsoever. There's nothing I see in this bill that would accomplish it. And so I want to know what you would say to the thousands of patients who have had their children's lives saved because of this. And there are thousands. The Colorado Patient Registry has about 85,000 people, not to mention there are tens of thousands of unregistered patients, including our veterans who use cannabis to help their situations. So dabbing is one of those things that actually helps keep me alive and several of the families that we know. It is useful as far as a therapeutic measure. And if you don't understand that, I would be happy to talk to anybody who does not understand how these things are applied therapeutically. That's another thing that my organization does, is we teach people how to use it therapeutically versus the recreational aspect of it. So, and I do agree that medical professionals need education. I agree teen mental health is a huge issue that is swept under the carpet because of the stigma. But you don't blame the substance for something that was already there. We have to work on our teens and their health. And the education programs that have worked for tobacco, that have worked for all of these other drugs, will work for this as well. This bill does not do anything to help that. And just to talk about dosing, I
Hi,
use
Bridget.
upwards.
It's been a couple minutes, so just please
Okay.
be considerate. We still have 9 people on the queue, so just and some folks who have waited for 45 minutes. And so just please keep that in mind. But thank you so much. And
Yes.
just feel free to wrap up your thoughts.
Last thought is dosing. We have several pediatric patients who are using more than 1,000 milligrams of THC. It's end of life, it's cancer, it's epilepsy, and it's autism. And these are very valid reasons, and their lives are being saved by this. So we really would need to have more stakeholder meetings, not right before you drop a bill, but prior to the bill. Thank you.
Bridget, would you be able to send me information about the doses that those kids are on? And just to be clear, bill hasn't dropped. It was a draft that was leaked, but we'll go to the next person.
All right, we'll go Tina, Julie, Richardson, and then Sean Rhoda, then Truman Bradley, and then Jason Wharf. That's our next 5. And again, please keep your comments to a couple of minutes since we are approaching the 90-minute mark.
Hi, can you all hear me? My name is Tina Marquis, and I'm the president of the school district for the Boulder Valley. We represent 30,000 students across 500 geographic miles, and we have 7 comprehensive high schools serving around 8,000 teenagers. Last night, we passed a resolution in favor of limits on high potency THC products across the board. And we also are hoping for limited or controls around marketing and social media that can be accessed by particularly the 12 to 18 crowd. I understand that that will not be addressed, but we will continue to advocate for that and hope to get that in future legislation. Our board passed this unanimously and with great enthusiasm. We have heard for the last few years that some of the new products are causing huge problems for our high schools and are having significant negative outcomes on our students in a way that they didn't before these products arrived onto the scene. We need help. We need both funding, which we're not getting for mental health. We need funding for addiction recovery, which we're not getting that funding, and we need less access for our teens. It's like a tidal wave that we can do nothing about, and we need help from from the legislature to give us support for the health and stability of our teens. So again, a unanimous quick resolution, you can find a resolution on the BDSD Board Docs website. We are very happy to advocate. We have a group of parents that are happy to participate and let you understand how this is impacting our community and how you can be a partner to us to creating a healthier environment for our students. Thank you.
Great. All right. Thank you. We'll go to Julie, Sean, Truman, Jason, and then Ben Waters. Those are our next five. Julie, there you go. You're on mute. Julie, you're on mute.
Julie, you're muted.
Okay, there we go. How's that? I'm not going to go into the teenagers too much because Bridget did such a fabulous job. I'm very involved in the cannabis community as service marketing director for Colorado NORML, but I'm also involved in the patient community, and I am a longtime advocate. I've worked on education, housing, disaster relief. I'm from South Louisiana, so I've stayed very busy. However, I am a cannabis patient, and I take almost a gram a day. I went through extensive testing at UC Health to see if they could produce a seizure, and they could not break that barrier. What I would like to share with you is the side effects of what I had to take and what my son, who has epilepsy, has to take. And it's Keppra. And they know these side effects because they've gone through extensive studies through the FDA and tested this on various situations. And you cannot say, okay, there's an opioid epidemic with the teenage, and then go to the pharmaceutical company and go, okay, you have to cut everybody's medicine, because that's exactly what's going to happen. Everything I take, from tinctures to syrups to RSO to raw, is all concentrates. And with my metabolizing issues, I cannot take pharmaceuticals. So what this is basically saying to me is either you have to spend up to $1,500 a month to get everything and make it yourself. So it's forcing me to do that, leave the state. And a lot of us have thought about that too. And where is our safeguard? Putting epileptic patients in harm's way, is there going to be medical services for us? Are you going to help us titrate down and get back onto harmful pharmaceuticals? Are you going to look at our individual charts and how we've worked with responsible, respected doctors to get to this point? And so this is just extremely premature. The side effects from Keppra are kidney issues, and this is WebMD. You can have blistering skin, you can have depression, and it's one of the biggest things, but I wanted to hold this up to the screen and make sure I don't know if you can see this or not. This is WebMD. Those big red markers is because Keppra, one of the biggest side effects is suicidal tendencies. And reducing the concentrate is going to make us have to put our teenagers back on that. I cannot tell you the terror of handing that kind of pharmaceutical to your teenage child. I've done it. And what you have to do is then you have to go on another medication for depression, which often doesn't work and also causes suicidal tendencies. So let's be very, very careful with our patient community. And I understand this is a problem, but you know what also is a problem? They sell Adderall at school. They sell Ritalin at school. These are also problems. And you are taking this and trying to put it there, and it doesn't fit. Let's address mental health in our children. And let's really look at this bill and see where it's really putting people in danger, because it just doesn't match.
Representative Caraveo, Paul Lundeen cutting in here. I have to ring off to get to another appointment. I appreciate so very much the many, many perspectives we've had the opportunity to hear today, the personal stories, the policy comments. Quite frankly, look forward to more policy discussion. This section needs a tweak in this way, et cetera. I look forward to those conversations. I want to be very explicit. I am grateful for every voice I have heard today. Thank you very much, and I must go at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. I can hang out for a bit more, so let's continue with comments.
All right, we'll go to Sean, Truman, Jason, Ben, LaFauna. Sean,
Hi.
you're up. There you go.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. I'm a Zoom illiterate, but thank you so much for letting me have this opportunity to speak. I just wanted to spend a few minutes today talking about how I hear a lot of people talking from the industry about legalization in general, and it sounds like people in the industry are scared that we're going to go back to this so-called prohibition. I voted in favor of legalization, decriminalization. These are things I believe strongly in. But to the point of others who have spoken, these are not the products that we voted to legalize. I know it's a very sensitive issue. I hope we can have a rational conversation about what makes sense and what are reasonable restrictions. I liked hearing some of the concessions that Brian was talking about, and I'm glad to hear that people are having these conversations. But I heard one of the industry reps say that she can't even have a conversation about this bill. And that's where I really start to have a problem. What we're talking about here is not prohibition or making THC illegal. What we're talking about is these high potency products. And the truth is that these high potency products are leading to psychosis, suicide, and other very significant impacts on young adults. These products are marketed to children. Obviously, my heart goes out to these medical patients who are using these as medicinal products, so to speak. But when I find packages of shatter products called Scooby Snacks and Girl Scout cookies, it's really hard for me to believe that these products are being marketed to people like Bridget who need them for a legitimate medical concern. The fact is the industry is targeting children. And so yes, let's talk about that. Let's talk about how we can prevent getting these products in the hands of our kids. I also want to address some of these arguments about, there's no evidence that these products are safe. That's true, and maybe it's true that it's because, we can't have these tests. However, most quote unquote medicines go through years and years of trials to prove that they're safe before they go on the market. The community should not have to prove that something is unsafe. The industry should have to prove that it's safe before our kids are exposed to it. I also want to address this black market argument. I hear it time and time again, and quite frankly, it's the argument that I've heard from the NRA and that I've heard from Big Tobacco when it came to some of the vaping stuff that we were trying to do. The argument is that if we make these products illegal, there will be a black market. Well, guess what? As Mr. Padilla said, there's already a black market for this stuff. I really don't understand this argument. Our kids are getting these things on a so-called black market. In addition, there's a black market for meth. We have people making meth in bathtubs. Does that mean we legalize meth? There's a black market for heroin and cocaine. Does that mean we legalize heroin and cocaine? Of course not. And no, people are not comparing high potency marijuana in and of itself to opioids. What we're saying is that your black market argument is ridiculous. Okay, on the flip side, yes, Xanax and fentanyl are both extremely rampant in our society. Those are both legal. And my friend's son died last week after obtaining fentanyl laced Xanax on the black market. Legalizing Xanax and fentanyl doesn't make it safe for kids. So legalizing hard drugs is obviously not the answer. I'll end by saying most of the people on this call are profiting off of this industry. And quite frankly, those of you in this industry who are lying about medical studies and who are pushing your products on kids, selling products like Girl Scout cookies and Scooby Snacks are no better than the NRA or Big Tobacco. I wanted to ask to address some of the people in the comments who are attacking the parents and asking.
I'll have you wrap up really quickly because we.
Okay, this is it. I promise. I want to tell you. Here's where the money's coming from. My son got a PlayStation for Christmas. He sold it to buy shatter. Everything of value I've had in my house has either been stolen by my son to buy shatter, or is now locked in my trunk. I drive around with my valuables and any cash I have in my trunk because he will steal it to buy drugs. all because of shatter. I beg you, listen to the families, the parents, the schools, and the medical and mental health constituents. Stop listening to the industry. And thank you, Representative Caraveo. Really appreciate you doing this.
All right, so just because the stack seems steady, we're gonna these are the last 7 folks on the list. Truman, Jason, Ben, LaFauna, Veronica, Melissa, and then Robin. That's what we'll cap because we're over the 90 minutes.
And then please keep it to 2 to 3 minutes. I mean, we should have probably cut people off, but we were trying to be respectful. Please do not impugn each other's motives, either verbally, whether you are working in the industry, or if you're a parent, by saying this is your parenting problem. So each side, please be respectful. We've done a really good job with it so far, but don't let it fall apart in the end.
All right, Truman, you're next.
Hi, Representative Caraveo. Thank you for the opportunity to stakeholder. I think the industry's been hoping to work with you for quite some time, and better late than never. I want to talk about a couple of things briefly. The first is I've expressed concerns in the chat that the stakeholdering was not done appropriately. There were a number of people that were hoping to speak today. My hope is that the proponents of this bill will do proper stakeholdering in a forum that allows for more than 99 or whatever the cap is on this. I think it's really important that voices of color are heard, patient voices are heard, and that we really do get a robust opportunity to stakeholder. I want to switch and talk about prohibition. This is capping, making illegal high potency concentrates or anything with a potency, anything north of a certain potency is prohibiting those products. That's really the definition of what it is. We know that prohibition doesn't work. We've seen it for over 50 years now. What it does do is it rips communities of color who are disproportionately targeted by law enforcement. This is not my opinion, this is fact. The other thing that I want to address specifically to Mr. Padilla and the folks who are dismissing the illicit market claims is you are betting on your children's lives here. You're betting that the illicit market that goes through no testing, no regulation, no video surveillance, no tracking, no seed to sale tracking, you're betting that those products aren't going to end up in the hands of your children. That's not a risk I want to take. My partner has a 14-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 3-year-old. We have these hard conversations at home. It's not easy. No one wants to see teens use cannabis unless it's for medical reasons under the strict supervision of a medical professional. But let's not dismiss the illicit market. This is real. This is a big deal. And if you are concerned about these products, let's have a conversation about them. But outright prohibiting them is not the answer, because you will see these reemerge in the illicit market. That's something that's very real and it's very dangerous. And for law enforcement or anyone else that dismisses that, you're playing with the lives of everyone's children, my partner's children too. I am grateful for this opportunity to stakeholder. There's a lot that's wrong with this bill. There's a lot that's in here that doesn't understand the environment that already exists, the rules that are already in place, the organizations that already exist that are doing this that lost their funding due to COVID. I welcome the opportunity to have a conversation about youth use, as MIG has done for the last 11 years. Thank you.
Thanks, Truman.
All right, we'll go to Jason, then Ben, LaFauna.
Good almost afternoon. Thank you, Representative, for having this meeting. I'm just going to start by echoing what my colleague Cara said, pretty much point by point. While we're having a meeting, this should have been done months and months ago, before there was even a draft, respectfully. So I'm going to do my best. I really wish that the industry would have had some time, as you afforded the proponents of the bill in the beginning, but we didn't. So I'm going to do my best to stick to the time and get through some points. I'm also going to do my best to kind of hit on some misconceptions. I think that we could have saved a lot of time on this entire issue if the proponents and sponsors of the bill would have taken the time to listen to the hearings from 2010 and from 2013. Let me just introduce myself for a point. I'm the executive director of the Southern Colorado Cannabis Council. We are the oldest industry group in Colorado. We started in 2009 for two reasons. One, we were in the process of taking caregivers into a licensee status. We also have or did and have remained a pillar of patient rights. Access is essential. We are strong proponents of responsible regulation for that access. So I'm going to try to run through here, and I apologize, it's going to be a little disorganized. First and foremost, you made a comment that kind of stuck with me all through the testimony here, that the industry has claimed that you want to kill our industries. I've not said that. I am not aware of any of my colleagues who have made that claim. The fact of the matter is Smart Colorado has made that claim. I know this. I sat on the governor's task force in 2013, and I heard it over and over and over. I was on a work group with Gina Carbone, who is one of the founders, and she literally stated it almost in every meeting. So while it might not be your intent, the lobbyists that you're wanting us to work with have very much made it clear that this is their intent. Number two, there's this misconception in amongst the group of folks here today that high potency cannabis is new. Hash is high potency cannabis. Hash use has been traced back to ancient Egypt, to many ancient cultures. It's been found in tombs. So we know that this is just blatantly false. I'm sorry. Also, I think that I want to try to run through these three real quick. We have just generally some constitutional issues with your legislation. We think in many aspects it will be challenged in court or opens up that window. The caps, that, again, whether it's intended or not, you're going to kill the medical industry. The medicinal value of cannabis is not found until it's in a concentrated form. I've seen a lot of the links posted, and respectfully, I would encourage the folks to sort of ignore the old NIH studies. It's common knowledge and has been discussed that those studies are only funded if you're trying to prove a negative effect for cannabis because it's a Schedule I drug. So that definitely skews the outcome of those studies. I would encourage you and others to look to the studies of Israel. They're light years ahead of us. They've been doing it for decades and they know what they're doing. Number two, dosages. There's so many problems with this that I don't have the time to get into. But the biggest reason that we never went down that path was for you, Representative Caraveo, as a physician. You have a DEA license. This is a Schedule I controlled substance. Every time, when you recommend cannabis, you take the risk of losing that license. But again, there's court law behind this. Patients are really the only ones that know their dosage. If you were to look at the state of Colorado versus Jason Law, the judge very clearly determined that it's not even up to the physician because physicians do not have the knowledge to know what dosage should be.
Hi, Jason. Sorry, it's just been 4 minutes.
I'll do my best. But again, I respectfully ask that the industry has time to chat. We did not have that time. Tracking, again, that's a huge constitutionality issue. I would not even touch that with a 10-foot pole. And then I'm just going to finish up with two last points really quick. I think what you're doing, again, probably unintentionally, you have to keep in mind, we had an industry before any regulation in 2010. We existed for 5 to 6 years before that. What you're doing is pushing the industry into a corner. And, we've worked in good faith with the state since 2010 to create responsible regulation. This legislation is not that. And I would just, again, agree with Cara that there is no part of this bill that we are willing to compromise on. Our licensees are inflamed, I think is a good word. And then the last, I'd like to leave you with a question that I'm really hoping you'll answer. Do you, Representative Caraveo, have any continuing education on cannabis therapy, or have you consulted any of the experts like Dr. Getty or Dr. Cohen or any of the others around the state? Thank you.
All right, we'll go to Ben, then LaFauna, then Veronica, Melissa, Robin.
Hi there, Benjamin Waters from the Marijuana Policy Project. I'll keep this short and sweet. A number of the initial speakers, Dr. Stoit, and I know Mr. Padilla, mentioned studies and data points that just don't jive with some of our data. So I would just love to see a commitment to share those data sets and the underlying studies from that, so we can all be speaking from the same set of data. Thank you.
That was short, Ben.
All right, we'll go to LaFauna and then Veronica, Melissa, Robin.
Oh, good morning. My name is LaFauna and I'm a mother of 3 daughters in Colorado. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yep.
So I just wanted to start out to let you guys know in reference that I am a Native American and very involved in the livelihood of our community and always have been. I am a former social worker and my focus primarily was on child welfare. My own daughter started using high potency marijuana as a teenager, and our family had witnessed a severe decline in her life and her goals and just the drive for her future as a beautiful young lady who was involved in many aspects of our culture, missions, everything you can imagine. She had a lot of passion for that. When she started dabbing by way of severe peer pressure and accessibility, she started having severe paranoia and psychosis episodes, and we could not understand why or what was going on after everything was legalized. Since then, we have had her in a total of 4 different recovery programs, and which this family is still paying for, by the way. She's on her 5th one now. It has affected all of our lives, more importantly hers, in more ways than anyone can imagine. Soon after this legalization, we noticed that we did not vote for, we fought against as a community and several support groups. We noticed several friends of ours started coming forward, also desperate for help and trying to figure out how to help their own children and families that were skipping school, some of the worries, the family functions, no drive for their future goals. So we started our own support group as a last ditch effort to get our kids' lives back and start putting them into some kind of prevention or recovery. Our daughter was in and out on many occasions. The physical abuse that she had while from the circle of people that supplied these high potency marijuana, and they took advantage of her while she was unable to protect herself and under the influence. Just because of time, I wanted to share also my experience as a social worker has been enormous, going into the homes of some of these children where the parents had pulled up some of the stuff that they used in regards to creating the high potency marijuana. The children that we had hospitalized due to overdose because of the edibles, access to the edibles, it's just been devastating as a community member, as a social worker in child welfare. The results of the truancy courts, the dockets, there is no more room on the dockets due to problems with education and drive, and it has just been enormous. I just wanted to throw that out there. It's impacted our families greatly on a community level, not a macro level, but a community level. What I've seen, the decline in the drive of the past generation, the generations that are coming. So I just wanted to say that, with that being said, from a person deeply involved for promoting healthiness in her community, her cultures, I thank you guys for recognizing and at least acknowledging. Thousands of us are waving a white flag right now for desperate help for you guys to help us to get our family, our communities, and our lives back on track, instead of a bunch of family members out there running around trying to create their own support groups when it has to come from the top. I honorably say thank you.
Okay, we'll go to Veronica.
Thank you. I appreciate the time again. I didn't complete my last 3 minutes. I just have a few comments and a quick question. I'd like to say that there is nowhere in the state constitution or federal law which defines THC by a specific percent, and to do so here in Colorado would be an extreme overreach. In my opinion, it is absolutely irresponsible to call marijuana a hard drug, addictive, and or insinuate that we have a marijuana epidemic in any way, shape, or form here in Colorado. The fact is we do not have children or teenagers overdosing and dying from THC. I do feel sorry for the kids and the teens who are forced into marijuana, into rehab for marijuana usage. And I would like to assure you, Representative Caraveo, that all the parents who commented today, that there is way more use and easy access of other hard and dangerous drugs beyond other than marijuana or marijuana concentrates being used in high school currently. And we as parents and regulators should be focused on these, not trying to put random and unfounded limits on THC. These teenagers and kids do not need rehab for marijuana use. They need more education and easy access to high quality mental health. So in closing, I would like to respectfully ask Representative Caraveo, where in this bill does it ensure prevention of use and access by the Colorado youth? And part two of my question is, would you be open to a complete revision of your bill with a direct focus on funding research, quality mental health options, and solid educational campaigns to proactively and more responsibly address some of these ongoing concerns and issues being expressed? Thank you.
All right, Melissa.
Hi, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. My family is part of a community called the American Medical Refugees. We moved here in 2017 to save my son, Gavin. Gavin suffers from a rare form of epilepsy with 6 seizure types. He suffered seizure aggravation from all pharmaceutical drugs. He failed over a dozen, including in combinations. There is no rescue medication on the market that can stop his seizures. When he was 5, Gavin was on Topamax, Omphie, Valium, and Depakote at 5 years old on max doses. All failed to stop his seizures. In 2017, we decided to come to Colorado to try to save his life. I left my husband and 3 sons behind in Kansas. Since coming to Colorado, Gavin has had 2 years out of 3 completely seizure-free. When we came here, Gavin could not walk, Gavin could not talk, could not brush his teeth independently, he could not get dressed independently. Through the use of high-dose THC, Gavin is living a normal, typical life. He's able to go to school, he can play sports, and he is thriving in every way possible. Before we left Kansas, our doctors looked at us and told us that we needed to accept the fact that Gavin was not going to get better. We came here for cannabis, and it's saving his life. There's a lot of talk about we don't have enough studies, there's not enough data. And then we talk about the pharmaceuticals used for kids like mine to stop their seizures. And we have a lot of data, but most of the drugs that he was prescribed to stop his seizures actually have never been studied on pediatric patients, never, only studied in adults. So while I understand the concerns about lack of data, we know that the drugs that these kids are using to try to stop their seizures have very serious lifelong implications. Putting caps on THC use puts Gavin back in a box. We will not be able to control his seizures. Gavin will not be going to school. Gavin will not be able to thrive in the way that he is today. I'm asking you to please reconsider. I think the most important thing here, as many people have said, is we need more education. We have 4 boys who are highly educated about cannabis. That is our responsibility as parents. And, just like any other substance out there, our kids need education, they need support, and they need access to quality mental health care that's seriously lacking. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Melissa. And I'm not sure if you were here earlier when I asked, for those of you who are using this for medical uses, and you don't have to tell me here in public, you can send it to me later, just what the doses are and what the concentration of products are.
You got it.
Great.
Thank
So we have Robin and then Ashley. I know we said Robin was going to be the end of the stack, but I know that Ashley was having trouble getting into the meeting. So we will have Ashley and then wrap it up because we're nearing noon. So I'll wrap up this speaking.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Thanks, Rep. Caraveo. I'm here just as a private person. I just want to say that hearing the mom who just talked about her child suffering with seizures just really tore at my heart. And what strikes me is that there's a lot of moms on this call who have seen their children really suffer for a variety of reasons. And what I would love is for there to be some way for these moms, because I almost lost my son too, but I almost lost my son to addiction. My son suffered from something called cannabis hyperemesis syndrome and was hospitalized 11 times. Part of the problem was he never believed it could be the marijuana. We have a messaging and a confusion problem where young people think it's safe. And there's nothing you can say to them that would convince them otherwise when they've grown up around green crosses in their hometowns. So one of the things that I think we have to address as a community is looking at the ease of access to high potency marijuana, because we do know for sure that it harms young people in certain ways. My son was a joyful athlete, and he became someone who was disinterested in life, very comfortable with being bored, and eventually became very, very sick. There has to be a middle ground to serve families. And I appreciate you going for a solution, Rep. Caraveo, and I'd love to see what happens from here. But I certainly think it's worth talking about. And I think we all have to keep in mind not to villainize anyone, but the industry does have financial motivation. And I think we have to think about people out here who don't have any financial motivation, but have real concerns and would appreciate the curiosity, at a minimum, the curiosity of the industry for some of the things that happen with their products, the ease of use and the misunderstanding when you market a product as medicine and then tell everyone it's okay to use it recreationally. Thank you.
All right, then last we'll go to Ashley and then wrap this up.
Thank you, Representative Caraveo. My name is Ashley and I'm the Executive Director of Colorado Normal. I had contacted you earlier on in hearing about the rumors of this bill, and we, like many have discussed, there wasn't very much talk about stakeholder meetings, so I look forward to having more stakeholder meetings with you, and I hope we're able to do that. I've heard a lot of parents on here who have had dark experiences with cannabis and use with their teenage kids. And if this is the case, I just wonder why we have an 18-page bill that tracks and traces, limits THC, gets rid of medical, vaginal, and suppositories, which are used. And I hear high potency used so much when we need to stick to medical grade, because there is a difference between adult use and medical grade, and trying to combine these two into one is something very concerning in your bill. And also asking for dosage from patients. We would need access. Some patients make their edibles or whatever they take at home. So what we would need is access to even test the products made from home, which you're not able to do. So that's why patients actually understand what they need, and this isn't something for a bill to have a serving size dose. Also, I wanted to speak on the confidentiality. You had spoke at your town hall in regards to running a bill in confidentiality for legislators who are being targeted. And there was one in particular that a dog was poisoned due to whatever not their address was leaked, and you wanted to keep privacy. So in trying to keep them that confidential, this bill actually airs the dirty laundry of all MMJ patients, all MMJ doctors, and it does it pretty much, HIPAA laws are violated a lot in your bill. So it's just something that I'd like to talk about, and I look forward to having more stakeholder meetings with you. And in regards to usage in isolation right now with COVID, we can see an uprise in a lot of depression. We see an uprise in suicide, and I wouldn't contribute that just to THC. Contribute that to isolation and quarantine and what everybody else is going through with mental health. It's not just THC. And I will leave with that. And thank you so much for letting me speak, and for having this stakeholders meeting.
Thank you, Ashley. And so with that, we'll end it. I think we've gotten through everybody who ended up on the list. Thank you all for going over 30 minutes. And thank you all for the respectful verbal testimony that you all provided. This is something that obviously we were here to listen to all sides, and we will definitely continue these conversations. I will be more available next week once I'm down to one job, right, as opposed to two, because I balance clinical work outside of this. So we will definitely continue conversations and further refine the bill draft that we have so far. Taking all your comments into consideration. And I hope that that as many of you have offered, that the conversation will continue as opposed to industry saying, we're just not going to talk about this. So the recording will go out to all 180 people that we had registered. Feel free to send it to those who weren't able to get into the meeting. As I said, there were Zoom limits how many people I can have based on my subscription, and so not everybody may have been able to get in. But thank you all again for joining today for a couple hours, and look forward to talking more. Take care.
Thanks, Rep. Caraveo.